Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara. Episode 35. Shri Mahaswami, the Sage with Eyes of Light. The Diary of a Seeker of Truth. Dr.Serge Demetrian. Dear devotees, now we shall listen to the second section of part 2 of this divine book under the subtitle The Lotus Pond. Karveti Nagar, Tuesday, 28th September 1971. For the last few days, I felt that I should stay here until 7th October. Then an important chapter of my life might come to its end. Perhaps, with the capacities gained up till then, I will be able to walk alone by becoming a docile instrument for the divine will. We will see. All the events must take into account that what is written in the stars, that is, one's destiny. Although I went through a marvelous spiritual period that fulfilled the unrelenting yearning of my heart, and I have been living a blessed life since March 1971, events in daily life are not simple to handle, and yet there is a clear improvement in my attitude and my responses. Karveti Nagar, Wednesday, 29th September 1971. Swamiji looked into himself. Today is Vijayadashami. During the 9 days of the Navaratri festival, Sri Mahaswami, with some rare exceptions, did not speak. In the last days, he was not even communicating through gestures. He was made out of tense steel, surrounded by tiny vibrations, barely perceptible to the naked eye. Yesterday evening at the hermitage, after a long wait, Sri Mahaswami scattered all the visitors and allowed me to contemplate him longer. Then, although it was growing late, he meditated on the platform at the foot of the tree with statues behind the hermitage. He was sitting in such a way that I could clearly see him from down below. He then descended, and before entering the hut, he showed his eyes to me. They were swallowing up his face. So large they seemed to me, white and blue at the same time, illuminated from the inside by silvery sparks. This morning I found him again inside the hut. He was standing and looking at the open door. The brilliance of his look obliterated the gloom of this room that was without any windows. Then I felt as being pushed by him to stay 2 hours on the other side of the lake. I meditated, I wept, I prayed. Finally, the mind became calm. The assault of the thoughts had been difficult to contain. I had a thesis to rework at the University of Madras, which means time, money, efforts, and distraction of books that have no more connection with my present concern. And also, a certain person in Madras has cheated me. The monthly pension from Salem has not yet come. I have to decide between staying here, where Sri Mahaswami spiritually retains me, and going to France, where I am pushed by reason. Perhaps I will have to go to Madras in order to take the measure of what seems to me to be a disaster. When the mental agitation had been stilled, Swamiji called me again to come near to the hut. He came out only for me, and as soon as I arrived, he went down to the lake under the pretext to fill his kamandalu, a thing he almost never does. While coming back, he changed his direction to go round me by the right side in a half circle at close quarters. I stood on a quite high step as if frozen. This time his eyes were matte yellow to old gold and motionless, almost eyes of glass. Later, Sri Mahaswami came once again down the flight of stairs for his ablutions. I was standing on the southern side of the lotus pond at my usual place, on the last step at 5 meters from his right side. He permitted that I should enter the water along with him. Every time he touched the liquid with his hands, I felt a low but clear electric current. At the end, I had the opportunity to accompany him as he sat for a short meditation. By evening, I found once again my place on the same step as Sri Mahaswami, and taking the advantage of the darkness, I stood at only 3 meters from him on the south side. Someone brought a large oil lamp and placed it on the right side of Swamiji, again southwards. I longingly contemplated his eyes. They were immense. It was as they would jump out of their sockets. In an instant, I felt as if I was very near to him, that I could touch him. Then I was in him. I was he. Soon he sent me back to my place 3 meters farther away, where I landed without any damage. When I am in his presence, these phenomena happen often for a few seconds or longer. After this, Sri Mahaswami drew in the air some beckoning signs. Then, all of a sudden, and as if by chance, he directed his hands in Anjali towards me. This gesture relaxed my back, which was caught in the grip of a forceful tension. Suddenly, he opened both palms and tore me from the skeleton of the body, brought me towards the east and up above, offered me to somebody, and finally threw me in the lake. Immediately, I felt purified. I felt younger. A short inward plunging followed. Swamiji had taken his place in me in such a way that it was he alone who looked into himself. Afterwards, under the pretext of taking rest, he laid down, the head towards north, which was unusual to him, on the step above that on which he did his rituals. Then he turned over on his abdomen, a position he takes very rarely. During the next 2 hours, he showed to me his feet. At some moments, it was as if he pressed himself into me with his heels. The night had become darker. Sri Mahaswami sat up in Padmasana on the last step facing south-southeast. I took advantage both of the darkness and of the absence of the most rigorous of the assistants and approached him at less than 2 meters. I attentively looked into his eyes, mostly into the left eye, the one that is still used for seeing. I was there a gleam that at the beginning I took for a reflection on the white of the left eye of a quite powerful electric bulb which was recently installed in the middle of the hut's side wall. Looking more attentively, it appeared that it was a much stronger and localized brightness. The pupil itself was shining. After a few minutes, the night had quite advanced. His pupil widened. I perceived that it was a white, silvery manifestation of an inexpressible force, of an extraordinary clarity. It was not a normal light. It was a substance that was not comparable to anything else, unique, indescribable. This brilliance seemed to come from the interior, from behind the eye. In order to verify it, I concentrated even more. I finally understood there was a hole like a crater, disgorging lava of dazzling incandescence. This substance could not have come up except out of the innermost fire, the interior of Sri Mahaswami, his core reality. Once the observation was finished and the certitude was born in my heart that what I experienced was real, he pushed me back to my place, as an excess of that sparkling fire could have damaged my own eyes. I continued to contemplate from afar his pupil. Soon a particle of luminescence stuck to my eyes and my whole body was shaken by a cold air draft, tenuous and sharp. Then the luminous substance became larger, better delineated, and started to turn upon itself. It was as if a drilling gimlet or tool had entered into me through my eyes, and now it progressed unhesitatingly. The rotating spiral cut through me and mercilessly tore through every obstacle, boring for itself a passage towards the middle of my chest. This piercing lasted a few minutes. The scintillating tool a steady lightning reached finally up into the center of my meditative heart, where it was welcomed by own point of luminous substance that had just reappeared, and which, although minute, was exactly of the same nature as the particle of luminescence sent out by the eye of Sri Mahaswami. It was as if a significant event had taken place. For a considerable length of time, it was an important operation of spiritual surgery that, I may say, had taken place. Sri Mahaswami had opened an access through my eyes, leaving in place an empty tube by which he could arrive at will in my heart. After a pause of 10 to 15 minutes, he directed once again the drilling tool across my eyes. Did he want to check the already accomplished work? After 30 seconds, he withdrew the tip of the rotating arrow. Was he satisfied with his work, or was I at the end of my capacity to withstand the pressure? I understood somehow that I had to leave and that I should not come after dinner to sleep on the stairs. I accomplished a longer prostration and moved away. Before entering the road of the mill, I looked back to the lotus pond. Sri Mahaswami was still there, sitting on the side of the lake, facing north towards the mill, accompanying and protecting me. And truly, I felt his presence round me for the entire evening until far among the shadows of sleep. Karveti Nagar, Thursday, 30th September 1971. Sri Mahaswami, by his real voice. By the time of my arrival at the hermitage this morning, Sri Mahaswami had finished his morning bath. He was meditating on the side of the waters, immobile, a statue of a golden mat like wax, dressed in ochre. But this did not stop him from noticing me, and I immediately felt as being taken in charge, an occurrence not always automatic and which can happen only by his own will. Sri Mahaswami turned towards me as much as the step on which he stood permitted it. However, I had stopped on the northern side at some 20 meters of him because my preparation proved incomplete, or perhaps the visions of the last day had strained my nervous system. Still, it has been possible to become totally him for several minutes. Then, most certainly by his will, I came very close to him, either through thought or otherwise, as I did not move from my 20 meters distance, while he visibly seemed not to have moved a single millimeter from his position, seated on the side of the lotus pond. What is sure is the fact that I could observe from a distance of 1 meter only the pupil of his left eye shining with the unreal light. Sri Mahaswami seemed to be made of a brightness that spread outside by way of his pupil. Then Sri Mahaswami retired in his hut. I saw him for a long period, sitting on the side of his bed, before he retired behind the screen in the back of the room so as to perform his morning puja. I concealed myself behind the hut in order to meditate without being distracted. After exactly 1 muhurta, I was permitted to come to the front door that was being opened just at the moment when Swamiji, who had finished his puja inside, entered the front portion of his room. He sat cross-legged on his bed, facing south, and asked for some books. He started loudly reading in Sanskrit Vishnu Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, with the commentary of Adi Shankara. It was then, I think, that he somehow transmitted to me that book. Sri Mahaswami was reading with his real voice, in fact, a non-voice, a mental voice, as it was not producing acoustic vibrations. I could hear it directly in myself as a modulated, luminescent haze. Then the voice became audible. It was of a surprising fineness, almost childlike, melodious, and very clearly articulated. After some time, he returned to his customary voice, the ordinary voice that passes through the throat. However, every time he was reading words of a certain weight as Brahman, Shiva, Vishnu, this voice was becoming deeper, and I was feeling these words resound inwardly in me. Under the force of the divine names uttered by Sri Mahaswami, my breath stopped and the chest was held for few moments in a void. I think that his true voice was accentuating in an inaudible way, the customary voice. How else to explain otherwise the power of certain names? An assistant started reading alternately with him. When it was the assistant, I did not feel anything. But when it was Sri Mahaswami who was repeating the same words, they shone in my heart. The process was repeated with a few paragraphs from the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, alternatively read by the assistant and by Sri Mahaswami. I stood concealed behind the left jamb of the door, trying not to lose any syllable. At a certain moment, Sri Mahaswami, under the pretext that he wanted to see better, took the book in his hands, came down from the bed, and without any haste started towards the door and squatted on the threshold at some 30 centimeters from my feet. I was paralyzed by the intensity of my inward process of withdrawal from the senses at so close quarters. Opening my eyes from time to time, I noticed that he tried to read looking through the slit in between the united fingers kept in front of the left eye, Galini Mudra. What had I now to do? I was not in front of Sri Mahaswami and facing the lightning of his eyes, but at his right and behind him. I set about meditating on the light of his eye, but seen from across the nape of his neck, and by his blessing I succeeded. Is there anything that cannot be achieved at 30 centimeters from Swamiji? The light coming from his eye filled my entire body as if I had been immersed in a bath. Then it localized under the form of a little sun in between my eyebrows. I tried to concentrate on this point. I was convinced that I would be able to split body and mind and cut the knot that was binding me to the perishable. Probably I was slightly tired and could not continue after a promising start, for after some time Sri Mahaswami retired. I understood that I had to come out of my hiding place behind the left jamb of the door. Now I could move easily. The reactions of the organism after these contacts on the borders of the reality are less and less painful. I started moving in a large circle by walking round the lake. Having come back to the front of the hut, I saw Swamiji coming out just when I arrived at the door, as if he was waiting for me. He looked for a long moment into my eyes and he seemed satisfied. Later, he came down, sat on the last step of the reservoir, facing east as usual, and allowed me to witness, with the water up to my knees, the entire evening prayer. Once the night had fallen, he performed an extended series of salutes and appeals in all the directions of the space. He emphasized the movements by looking towards me with alternating gestures and rapid looks of his gleaming eyes. He searched my heart that seemed to be cast in transparent soft paste glass. He pierced it, he beat it, he cut it into small bits, then he shoveled it as if into a press where it was squashed. I witnessed this treatment until he stopped, probably satisfied with his work. Swamiji changed then his place and came exactly to the same point as yesterday, which was facing south, southeast, in order that I should see his eyes. I stood by his right all the time, clinging to my position with the conviction that I had to stay there. Every time I felt that the power failed me and I was on the point to give up, Sri Mahaswami, by his hand, drew in the air some movements directed towards my head, and I was able to continue. I tried to rediscover the lightning in his eyes. Despite my efforts, and although I was in a favorable position, I could not see anything. It is without question that the lightning bursts forth only by his will. This evening, I felt that the 10 last days would be the conclusion of the 6 or 7 months that I lived in his proximity, and that I would receive the firm foundation of understanding on which I could take a decision regarding the future. Devotees, we shall now continue to listen to the lotus pond in the coming episode, bowing at the holy feet of the Gurus. Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara. Jaya Jaya Shankara.